So we're thrilled to be kicking things off here this afternoon. We've got a really important session, and I'd like to go ahead and present our two speakers today. So, starting with Dr. Jack Callaghan. Dr. Jack Callaghan is a professor in the Department of Kinesiology and Health Sciences at the University of Waterloo, with a cross appointment in mechanical and mechatronics engineering. His research focuses on the causes of spine injuries, particularly how cumulative loading affects spinal tissues. He's received major research funding from NSERC and CIHR, and has collaborated with a range of industry partners, including companies in automotive and office furniture manufacturing. Next up, we have Dr. Stephen Fischer. Dr. Stephen Fischer focuses on preventing work-related musculoskeletal disorders by improving how injury and risk factors are measured and managed before injuries occur. His research combines biomechanics, ergonomics, and emerging technologies such as AI, wearable sensors, and digital human modeling to help organizations identify risk early and create safer workplaces. So, at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jack Callaghan and Dr. Stephen Fischer.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
It was a mouthful.
Yeah, sorry. Morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's nice to see a full house. I think a better intro would have just been just Jack, right? If you watch Will and Grace, that's maybe dating myself a little bit. I'm more importantly here to represent CRE-MSD, which is the Center of Research Expertise for the Prevention of Musculoskeletal Disorder. That's not any less of a mouthful, I guess, really. We're funded by the Ministry of Labor, and our goal is to prevent workplace accidents from happening in the first place. So the lunchtime talk that we just saw was fascinating to me as a spine biomechanics researcher, but what we're going to see here is the opposite side of this. That was all about treatment after injuries happen. Our mandate is to try and stop them from happening in the first place. Oh, you're way ahead. Okay. Yep, let's go right there is perfect. I'm not sure we have the latest slides, but we'll go with this. Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction. I'll give you a short one now. What CRE-MSD is, just a reminder, thank you, of why we think MSDs are so important. I think we got a nice flavor of that. You're going to see some similar numbers to the lunchtime talk about how impactful this is in the province, globally actually. And then I'm going to give you some impact stories that we just recently completed last year with Ontario Power Generation and Ford Motor Company, showing that prevention works. Okay, we can really drive these numbers down. I'm going to show you some of sampling of the resources, what we do at CRE-MSD, including a calculator. And then Dr. Fischer's going to come up and talk about AI and some current trends in technology for MSD prevention. I clearly pushed something wrong. Okay, got it now. I don't. These are older slides. Okay. So this is how we view ourselves. This isn't right. Yep. Okay. So, as I mentioned, we're a research center, so we're fairly small. We only have 2 full-time staff. We rely on the generosity of a lot of researchers in Ontario. There's 40 affiliated with the network from every university pretty much in Ontario and research institutions. They donate their time. What they get back in return is the potential to get some research funding to do studies. We collaborate with workplace partners. We're not directly working with workers in most cases, but we facilitate and support bodies that do, like the HSAs in the province. As I mentioned, we are funded through the Ontario Ministry of Labor, and I think this is down. Yeah. This is how we view ourselves. I have another graphic that was on the updated slides, but it's not here. This tends to be a little centric. Maybe it represents how everybody thinks of themselves, that I'm the center of the world. But we have this hub and spoke model of how we describe what we do. So we're in the middle in this model where we generate knowledge. Okay? If there's problems that are happening in the system, we will go out and research it, provide resources for industry and practitioners to use, and then they face workers. We will do studies from time to time that directly face workers, but for the most part, we're a little separate because of our size. The other graphic actually has workers at the center, which is how I think about it. We're all here to support workers and help workers at the end of the day. We're creating information and resources that filter through the HSAs, the Ministry of Labor, WSIB, and ultimately down to workers and industrial plants. So what do we offer? One of the biggest things we have is the MSD prevention guideline for Ontario. If you haven't heard of it, there's a link here for it, and it's just msdprevention.com, okay? It is a free website with resources that are vetted by a board of representatives in Ontario, experts and industry reps, and anything that goes up there has been vetted. It's not just Jack saying this is important, okay? So they are vetted by a peer board. We hold events, webinars, workshops, conferences, all free in addition to the website. Position papers on hot topics. I think this is the mental health one, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second. And one of the other big things we do is community of practices. We try and bring people together that are dealing with like-minded problems. Our biggest community of practice is in healthcare for patient handling, and there's currently over 1,600 members representing hospitals, PSWs, et cetera, on that community of practice. I should mention the guideline itself has over 300 resources for MSD prevention. Okay, why do we need to focus on it? This is just parroting what was just said at lunch, but they had 40%, we're 35%. The number hovers around. It is the largest lost time claim category in Ontario. In fact, every province across Canada and in the US, any first world country, it is a leading claim category. Of those, 80 to 90% are what we would classify as overuse injuries or strains, with overexertion and dynamic and repetitive motions really making up 100% of that number. You add those numbers together and it's roughly $80 million of direct costs from WSIB. That doesn't count what comes out of your pocket for replacement workers, quality, things that impact your company. One of the biggest things I want to say here is these are preventable. Okay, this is the biggest message, that if you forget one thing when you walk out the door, we can prevent almost all of these injuries if we are intervening in what they're exposed to, okay? So the worker itself, obviously, it has a big impact on their life, that they can't work. We saw the chronic pain pathway that develops. But the secondary impact on companies are replacement workers, as I mentioned, quality, presenteeism, like culture in a company are all in fact affected by these factors. I just want to expand on it a little bit so you understand the scope of this problem. Men have historically accounted for about 60% of the injuries. This is starting to trend differently now. We're starting to equalize. This may be the one thing that we don't want equal rights for between men and women. But women are increasing the number of injuries that are being reported. Men are starting to come down, but it's just a percentage distribution. On the right is by age group, and this is a more concerning graph to me. Historically, these injuries were biased towards older individuals who'd been exposed to work for a long period of time. So you can see the dark blue, I think it is there, 155. We have our emergency warning. And we're done. I know, shocking stuff. Okay, so usually it's older workers. Traditionally, it was like 40 plus reported the highest percentage of these injuries. But what you're seeing is that green bar is the most recent data from 2023. And you hopefully can see that these injuries are happening earlier in people's lives now. Why is that a big issue? Musculoskeletal disorders continue to be the disability that people spend the most years experiencing. Okay, and this is including cancer, heart disease, everything else. It's years lived with a disability. MSD is the leading global factor. Okay, so this can impact people's lives for like 40 plus years if you're injured in your 20s. Okay, mental health I brought up. And we've heard a little bit about it this morning. It is currently the fastest growing category at WSIB. So these slides are directly from WSIB. It's not the biggest category, it's quite small with the numbers, but it is growing rapidly. One of the other things I want to raise is there's a crossover between MSDs and mental health claims. Has anybody seen Painkiller, the series on Netflix about opioid addiction? Changed my life. It completely changed how I viewed MSDs. It became not just about preventing a worker from being hurt, it was how it infected the family, their income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The pathway to opioid addiction, which I'm going to show you in a second as well. But what we are noticing here is that where it says none, that is just an MSD injury. So average about 43 days, the cost from WSIB, just the compensation payments, are $7,500. If psychological impairment is included, all of a sudden you lose 1,300 days, and it costs almost $200,000. If the MSD progresses into chronic pain, the lunchtime discussion, all of a sudden we're now over 2,000 days of lost time, may not go back to work at all, and again, $200,000 of just direct claim costs. Now, if we have the secondary factor of chronic pain and mental health issues, we're 2,300 days lost time and $250,000, okay? All tying back to if we can prevent these, it's not going to progress to chronic pain, it's not going to progress to a mental health problem. Which then led us down where it changed my life. We used to only think about the top of this diamond figure, and I drew this when I first saw that study, this diamond, where on the left we have mental health, and we've created a crossover figure that links the CSA health, our mental health standard, to MSD generation. Okay, so it's really, can you step in and prevent mental health issues if you stop MSDs? And there's very strong evidence for this. On the other side, this was working with the construction groups, painkiller addiction. Okay, you just heard the MDs in the room adjacent to us. They go to a doctor, they prescribed opioids for pain. Okay, that often becomes an addiction cycle. Again, if you stop MSDs, painkillers don't get prescribed, there's no addiction pathway there. Okay, so these resources freely available. The QR code will take you directly there. I've given my slides to the organizers, so you should be able to get a copy of these as well. Workplace violence, obviously, if you know anybody that is in pain, they're usually very short-tempered, and we're working with the National Safety Council in the US, and there's a resource the same as these two that is coming this spring, linking MSDs and workplace violence. Okay? So it's more than just a worker getting hurt, going on WSIB for lost time claims. Okay, the exciting part of what I want to talk to you today, once we know kind of the tools we have, why MSDs are important, is transitioning from a reaction approach to being proactive or a systematic approach for MSDs. How many people deal with MSDs or do job inspections or health and safety committee? And okay, fair number of you, awesome. So you're very familiar with the reactionary approach where a worker gets hurt, you go check a job, you say, this is probably what caused this injury. We do an intervention, we change that job, we move on, okay? Ideally, we want to push that upstream so it becomes just part of a health and safety program like anything else. One of the parallels or analogies I always give is like hearing protection. You don't walk into a plant and you don't see a box of hearing protection there. That's what my goal is for MSDs. We want people when they enter a plant to think about what exposures are that link to MSDs and be proactive in preventing these, okay? So we worked with Ontario Power Generation, OPG, and Ford Motor Company to do 2 big case studies looking at whether a prevention program made a difference. One of the reasons that got me thinking about this was an article in CBC 3-4 years ago that 1 in 5 Canadian workplaces have no safety program, even though they're legislated to have them, okay? That in itself is shocking, but trying to be the eternal optimist, I looked at this as an opportunity. And I thought, well, if they're gonna have to implement plans and somebody's gonna crack down on them, let's get something in front of them that it's not just the regular health and safety plan, it's let's incorporate MSD prevention on top of it. So we have a resource that's shown here on the right. Again, just linking a health and safety plan that's legislated, I think this is the CSA standard, and how you incorporate MSD prevention right as part and parcel of that plan. So you're not doing a whole separate program, it is part of your health and safety plan. Okay? And this is exactly what Ford and OPG both did in their companies. So all it looks like is it's part of the plan, do, check, act cycle that I'm sure many of you use, and we've embedded the RACE model for hazard analysis right in that. So it's management commitment, worker participation. The do is no different. We're assessing hazards and doing it, and then we're evaluating our program, and it becomes a circle, okay? So very straightforward to do, well within everybody's capability, especially if you already have a health and safety plan. So resource freely available. Okay, meat of the story. So this is OPG's story. And this started because they had a high MSD rate. It was well above the provincial average. It was the majority of their lost time claims, counted for 40% of all injuries at OPG, okay? So they had been trying to reduce it very much with a reactionary approach. Steve and I know some of the ergonomists there, trained some of the ergonomists there, and were doing good work, but just weren't moving the needle on a company scale. So they set a goal so that first high level got management on board, got the union, labor on board, came up with a plan, assessed what needed to be done, implemented some of the high level components, and really laid it out over a 5-year plan. Doesn't have to be this long, but OPG is a big company, covers the whole province, right? So year 1 was really just establishing everybody to be on board with it. Years 2 to 3, if you think about it in the 10-step plan, this was doing, right? It was going out, hazard identification, looking at where the hotspots were, launching safety information inside the company, as simple as it's on the lunchroom. I don't know if you noticed it. There's think safely, safety, act safely, right? Those kind of things, posters. Campaigns, workplace talks, the monthly workplace talks, they would have ones focused on MSD risk factors. Years 4 and 5 were the evaluation and linking things back with an ongoing commitment to the plan. What happened? Cut their MSD lost time claims in half, went from 40% to 20%, well below the provincial average of 35 to 40%, right? So made a huge difference in the company. And I can show you it graphically here, where orange is all their lost time claims. The blue line is the MSD event claims, and you can see at the end they're down to 20%. So remarkable story. Became part of the culture at the end of what they implemented over 5 years. So the takeaways from it, it really became a cultural change around MSD. It just became viewed the same as any other exposure like noise, vibration, any of the common health and safety things we deal with. MSDs was treated the exact same inside the company, okay? So one of the things I skipped over, because I hate talking about it because it makes it look really bad. Did anybody notice what it was? If you look the first year into the program, their injuries went way up, okay? So I like to skip over it, but in all declaration, they had more reporting because they focused on it. They didn't want people pushing it down the road, self-medicating. They wanted to deal with it at the front. And this didn't bother them at all, and you can see it quickly declined over the course of the study. And it just became an ongoing component, okay? One of the things they measured was, at the beginning of it, they'd talk about MSDs and nobody had any idea what they were talking about. So it became common language inside the company by the end of the intervention. As I mentioned, one of the key things in my mind is this is a program. It became incorporated into their safe work planning process, okay? Any other hazard that was being brought in was evaluated before it was put into place, and we'll hear this at Ford as well. And it was just a continuously improving program. Awesome. I don't even know when we started. Okay. So this is Ford Motor Company. This went global. Okay. It started local in one plant with Allison Stevens, who's shown here. And she started as a floor ergonomist doing reactionary interventions, and also realized this is not a solution to help everybody. This is helping one person, it's feeding one person rather than teaching them how to catch their own food, right? So I have a handful of these if anybody would like a hard copy. I don't have as many as in this room, but I have about 10 of them. So first come, first serve if you'd like a hard copy of them, and we would happily mail one out to you. So as I mentioned, this shifted from a reactive individual workstation. You have a worker that's hurt, you have a problem, and they would go out and address that, to upstream in the company where they implemented design changes that they couldn't build a car that hadn't been already built virtually and signed off on as having low risk factors, to becoming a part of their safety program and in the collective agreement that this is required to stay at Ford. Okay, so it has become right in the culture. This is not dying no matter who leaves or comes and goes and what the flavor of the month is. This program is very well established. They rely on data, obviously, to prioritize high impact. So it's not, you're not going to deal with problems, but they have a process on where they pay attention, okay, first. Involved the worker union leadership. Everybody was at the table. But the most important thing, and what I'm trying to drive home here, is it wasn't just you as an ergonomist, you as a health and safety person. This was everybody in the company bought into this, okay? And that's where we're talking culture. So it became health and safety, again, being a broken record, just like everybody puts hearing protection on, okay? Their graph is nicer to talk about because they didn't get a surge of reporting after they launched a program. But you can see it's gone on and it continues. They've maintained this program. This is just the graph they were willing to share with us, being a private company. But the blue line is all their injury rates, and you can see they decreased it by 77% over the course of implementing this program. Like, shocking. And they gave us this number where that's equivalent, before they implemented the program, it was almost 40,000 lost time days across the company, which would shut down one of their entire plants for over 3 weeks. So they realized this was a big issue, okay? And we can preach this all day long. What is the real power here is the other two bulletins, that they reduced the number of ergonomics issues, which directly impacted quality, So they had a 5-fold increase in quality, 11% improvement in new vehicle quality. And if you compare it to their competitors, their rate is way higher, which is why they stand behind their statement that quality is job one. Okay, I'm not pitching Ford. I don't drive a Ford, but they have taken safety very, very seriously in that company and have done some truly wonderful things in protecting workers and realizing the benefit to quality, production, presenteeism, the culture of co-worker support. All these things have been measured. They saved, I didn't have the number on the slide, it was $43 million. Don't quote me on this, okay? But I believe they've estimated it was $43 million they saved in compensation costs inside the company. Big company, you know, big money, but it's still a shocking amount of money for that company. Okay, so not as an isolated project or initiative, has to be part of a plan. If you do that, it will all roll down and there is a big impact you can have. I talked about using guidance, investing. One of the big things here is sustainable systems. It's hard, like we've been there, right? You do something that's the current safety topic of the month and then it's forgotten because you're moving on to the next safety topic. But they really focused, like I said, with the union, they came on board and this became part of the collective agreement that it became standards and guidelines inside the company that were sustained, okay? So right up to the point that all jobs are classified on a virtual build, the pre-build that happens, everything is inspected and that line doesn't launch till jobs are green, what they call them normal red light, green light model. It's even transcended into their procurement process. So this is looking at parts that are coming in. I think we can talk about, like we're even talking about connectors that are coming in and making sure they meet the benchmark for force for closing connectors. So they're downloading this into their suppliers so that things come into the company, meet their guidelines and standards to protect the workers. So it's just not reactionary inside the company. Blah, blah, blah. Good. I know that was really, really brief. We held a whole conference on this, a full day conference like this one last fall, and it is all public domain. So all the lectures are on our website, but they're also on YouTube. So if you want to hear Ford talk about this for an hour or OPG talk about it for an hour, it's up there. I am not doing it the justice it deserves because this was huge champions that led these programs and had massive impact. But what I'd like you to take away from both of them, it wasn't just a lost time injury reduction, it was quality, culture change, the environment in the company. The return on investment was there, dollar and cents over and over again. Okay, which I know when we're trying to pitch these, sometimes that's one of the barriers, right, is what's the cost in this? And you can point to these that there are multiple other benefits here beyond just not hurting workers, which should be enough, right? Okay, some of the resources we have. One of the things we get asked about a lot is, that's great. Ford has thousands, tens of thousands of employees. They have a health and safety group that's probably in the 100 range. OPG is the same. How do I, as a small to medium business, do this when I don't have a full-time health and safety or ergo person working there? Some of these are scalable. We are working hard to try and roll this downhill. We have resources that span from small to large companies, and I'm going to show you some of those now. If you're dealing with a problem, I would strongly encourage you to come to our website. I get nothing from it. It is free. It is funded by you through the ministry. It was newly relaunched last year. And if you're just looking for resources, somebody else having this problem that I have, come here and look, because we do case studies, we do case competitions. There's one that's opening this week. If you have a great success story you'd like to share, keep an eye open for it. There's prizes for submitting your story on MSD prevention. This is what the website looks like. We relaunched it purposefully to address the shortcoming in the prior one. The prior one focused on experts. So it was for health and safety committees and health and safety professionals. We have completely changed the model of it where there's something here for everybody. If you have an injured worker, you can send them here, and that's the first column, I perform work. You go into that drop-down, and it gives resources that are at a worker level. They explain what an MSD is. Is it low back pain? Is it carpal tunnel disorder? It goes through all of them. So workers can get some education about risk factors and what MSDs are. And then it goes into, I manage work, I own a company, I'm a healthcare professional. You go into the healthcare professional one, it will give you direct access to evaluation tools. Okay, so it is really set up to try and pull in everybody. We were finding people would come and just leave because they didn't know what was there for them. Okay, so far it has been very well received by all levels of users. There are posters here, fact sheets, videos, awareness of MSD, templates, checklist. If you want to do the 10-step program, you can download it with a checklist. It's all there, and it's all free. As I mentioned, there's case studies, like everything from somebody had a problem with a push cart or something, and here was the solution they had. So we have all levels of solutions there, well over 300 resources that are freely available. The two big ones that are most frequently downloaded are the general and office guidelines. The general applies to all workplaces. These can be used for health and safety talks. You can put them on your bulletin boards. You can use them to guide inspections to look for problems, okay? And they just go from lifting to material handling to whatever. The office one is specific for computer usage. So it can set up people's workstations, coach them on what to do, sit to stand rotation, where to put devices on their desk. And you can download individual posters or they all come as a package. We also have hard copies of these. If you'd like us to send you some of them, we're happy to do that. Okay, into the small through large. What we've tried to do is create curated packages and guidance of what you should be doing at different levels of these companies and some of the resources that can support you to get there. So these are based on the Ontario definition, so you will likely know where you are based on how many employees you have. So the small is the challenging one. And of the 300,000 businesses in Ontario, over 97% or something are small businesses, and they don't have this support. So we've really tried to make easy, low-level resources that they can implement inside their small business, okay? Last thing I'm going to talk about today is the Ergo ROI calculator. And this just feeds back into this idea that there is a return here. It's not just about limiting the number of people that get hurt while working. And we worked with Washington State in the US, developed something very similar, and we took that on but changed it. So it is built on WSIB's database for the costs and sector-specific answers. And what it does is once you reach the problem or the level where you have a problem that you need to address and you're coming up with solutions, it lets you calculate what is the cost of my solution, what is the cost of the injury, how long will it be before I see this money returned, okay? It'll do 3 solutions at a time, so you can put it in, you can link 3 solutions that you're looking at, you're implementing a lift table, you're doing job rotation, you're doing whatever. You put them in, it'll calculate it out, and it'll tell you when you'll break even, okay? So I think this one shows like a year and a half, 0.4 of a year or whatever. We find it very helpful when you're talking to management to say, yeah, this is going to cost $5,000 for this piece of equipment, but within 6 months, this is going to pay for itself. I don't need this to come out of the budget. How it works is you put in information about your company. We don't store any of it. Okay, it's an online calculator. If you're uncomfortable with that, we can send you a spreadsheet, but there's some compatibility issues. Then you put in your potential solutions. We build it behind the engine on the WSIB lost time claim costs, and then it spits out the reduction injury costs predicted and payback period for that intervention. Okay. And now I'm going to flip to Steve, which I think I'm pretty close to on time. And he's going to talk about AI, so he's going to build off of our first keynote this morning. Down was it head, and you may have an extra slide in your deck.
All right, thank you very much, Jack, for that. And again, lots of wonderful resources available. And a question that maybe you have is, how do these resources come to be? The resources all come from research. So CRE-MSD is a network of researchers. We have over 30 researchers spread across all the institutions in Ontario. What I'm going to do today is talk about a specific research project to give you a sample of what that looks like. One other piece I want to make sure is crystal clear. CRE-MSD, again, we support our research community. We fund projects, but we've also recently launched a new student fellowship project. So if you have a particularly sticky challenge that you'd like to partner with a researcher and have a student that we pay for, let us know. We're happy to inject that. We don't have a lot of opportunities, but we think it might be useful. So what I'm going to talk about now is a topic that I've, with the use of AI, have come up with from pixels to prevention. It's pretty clever. Thank you, ChatGPT. This morning we started, and I think Dr. Jetta gave us a good kind of setup for the conversation of AI and what AI means. How many of you, I think Jack asked this question, how many of you do MSD hazard assessment in your workplaces, just by show of hands? How many of you do that by pointing your smartphone camera at workers? Nobody. Is anybody thinking about doing that? Now, maybe. Maybe. So what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the research. So this is an area that's popping up quite quickly. Again, for us here and some of the EHS software platforms that they're building in the market, Velocity, big press release around some IP on artificial intelligence. What that is using a smartphone for risk assessment. I'm not quite sure how they got that patented, given some other patents in the space, but that's a conversation for later. Cordy, again, launched a motion capture solution as well. Dorn companies, for those that are familiar with some of these major players in the US market. There's a big uptick in the use of computer vision, which is basically having your smartphone camera be the eyes to do the assessment. There's a big uptake in the use of those tools. Again, kind of a sidebar, one of the most exciting things in my career, lots of opportunities to travel the world and have some awards. But I got a phone call from Disney. Probably the most, again, kind of fantastic call I've ever had. And Disney uses computer vision in some of their applications, and they had some questions. So I'm going to tell you what I told them. Oftentimes, as we're learning more about these solutions, and you'll see them coming online, and if you haven't had a business development person from one of these companies contact you, I'm sure you will. And we see these solutions where we can take our smartphone and we can point it and get an assessment of how the body's moving using computer vision. And there's lots of questions around that. One of them is it as simple as point and shoot? And we can think we've all gone out and we've taken photos with our smartphone when we're traveling to Signal Hill, as we saw the talk this morning, and we want to take a picture. If you're like me, we're not all good at it, but we still point and shoot anyway. And that sometimes trickles into the hazard assessment space, especially as these tools are making hazard assessment more freely available. It's democratizing hazard assessment. I don't necessarily need to be a BCRSP professional to do this now. If I have the app on my phone, anybody can do it. So it makes it easy to just kind of point and shoot. There's some benefits of that, but there's some risks. And in a research sense, I had some cool videos here, but we're working with PDF, not PowerPoint, so I apologize, it'll be static. We have some really interesting technology, and what you see on the right is a technology called Thea. It's a computer vision tool that would be, I would call it research grade. So it requires lots of cameras. You probably wouldn't use it in a workplace, but because it has lots of cameras, those cameras can all talk to each other, and it's a more accurate estimation of where the different joints in the body are. And we had a chance to use this cutting-edge technology, and we can take videos from each of those different vantage points and run it into these AI computer vision tools and compare it to the benchmark. Helps us assess the differences between different systems and tools that are on the market and what we see in the lab environment. It also helps us understand what it means if I'm pointing from different directions, so we can provide some guidance back to some of our community partners. So this would have been a lovely video, lifting boxes. You would have got to see the skeleton. Point I wanted to showcase here is with the high fidelity research grade computer vision that we have, we get a really nice skeleton representation, a fairly accurate depiction of how the body's moving and what the underlying skeleton is doing. So this is our criterion by which we compare. What was really unique about this particular study, and I'm not sure how to this day we got this to happen, 5 different companies let us use all of their varied and sundry technologies and compare them against one another, which if you've ever done any sort of competitive analysis for RFP, there's a number of challenges that happen. But nonetheless, I think because AI is so new, everybody kind of wanted to know where they stood. Where were they in the market as they evolve and develop these models? So we were able to look at a very rich data set of not just how individual point and shoot angles influenced the accuracy of these tools and therefore their utility in MSD hazard prevention, but we were also able to look at how different software companies, which are built on different fundamental AI models, affect that answer as well. So what did we learn? I'm going to show you a couple graphs. And what I first want to focus on here is what you see on the y-axis is the absolute difference in degrees. So if we measured how bent over my spine is, for example, my trunk relative to my pelvis, if we measured that angle using our gold standard system, that was our baseline. And then if we measured it with an AI tool, what you're going to see in the bars here is that difference. Apparently this was an animated slide. You're not going to see anything. You're not going to know the data. Filling in, imagine in those 2 green boxes, imagine that you see a little black bar there that goes to about 10. So what we find is that if you film somebody, let's say doing a manual materials handling task like lifting or palletizing, if you film them from the right side of the body, which you can see in the pictures down and below, we get about 10 degrees of difference relative to our gold standard system. And we can talk a little bit about what that might mean. If we try to film somebody from the front or the back, so if you were trying to estimate my back angle right now and I'm facing towards you, we would see numbers upwards of 23 to 25 degrees. If we're looking at any of the angles in between, so anterior left, kind of these off-axis directions, the differences tend to be between kind of 25 degrees in the top end and 10 degrees in the bottom end. So they don't see exactly what we see. They don't work as well as some of the lab-grade systems, but one could argue that 10 degrees might not be so bad. What we took from all of this research was if we're starting to use these types of tools in industry, it's not as simple as point and shoot. We need to be able to see motions from the side as we typically would when doing types of assessments. The other thing that's really interesting is, what you don't see here, because this is a sanitized environment, is any occlusions. Somebody's not walking by, there's not a forklift passing through. And there's some thought that, oh, it's AI, like if we can't see it, the AI will just guess and will tell us what it is. And my takeaway there is the tools that are being used to create these artificial intelligence computer vision models are built on mathematics, not mathemagics. So the other tip is if you can't see it, your phone can't see it, it's guessing. Some softwares will actually tell you when they're guessing, and they'll tell you how much confidence they have, which is really useful. Other softwares won't. So it's guessing, you don't know, and you don't know what the quality of the data is. So that can be a really important takeaway as well. This is the new slide. These are some guidelines. Jack mentioned guidelines. Yeah. So what I want to do is just remind everybody that we're starting to see a proliferation of these types of tools, and I think they're really useful. But it's not as simple as just picking it up and running. It's not as simple as point and shoot. I think we need to be thinking about plan, point, and verify. So as you're seeing the emergence of these tools, the takeaways for today, think about what you're filming. You need to be able to see the motion. If you're looking at, an arm flexion, for example, you want to see it from the side, just as you would if you were, imagine you were a swim coach or assessing a gymnastics, or we just came out of the Olympics, maybe you're grading snowboard. You need to be able to see the actions, and you need to be able to see them approximately 90 degrees from the plane of motion. The optimal capture, the different computer vision platforms all ended up producing an error that was about 10 degrees. And if I just pause for a second, the way these systems are working is they're basically trying to estimate key points in your body. So if we had somebody who's pointing a software at me right now, the software might try to find my shoulder joint center. So where is that? Any guesses? Like, what would be a reasonable amount of error? Like if I was trying to guess this, like if I were 1 centimeter off, 2 centimeters off, what would be reasonable to you? Just yell at a number. We're not going to guess perfectly, right? But what would you accept? Would you accept 1 centimeter? Would you accept 2? Would you accept 3? 3. 3, going once. Do I hear lower, higher? Lower. We would accept, I know Jack will accept lower, 0. How low? 2? 1? 1? I'm going to stick with 2 because I'm going to split the difference here. If I'm trying to guess here and I'm off by about 2 centimeters, about 20 millimeters, well, I also need to guess at the elbow, and I also need to guess at the spine if I actually want to know what my shoulder is. If I misguess all of those by about 20 millimeters, I get 10 degrees of error. So when we talk about 10 degrees of error, what we're talking about is a computer seeing your joint centers within a range of about 20 centimeters. So for those that said 3, you're good to go. For those that said 1, you're going to want to be cautious. But again, I just wanted to give that context so you know what the state of the field is, and when you're evaluating these tools, as you might, as they come on board for your EHS system, hopefully some of this information is useful. One last point I want to wrap up on. How many folks have used a NIOSH analysis? Does this sound familiar to anybody? Hands up high. Yeah. How long does it take you to do a NIOSH analysis? I see in the very back, you had your hand up, I'm sorry. Yeah. How many people do it as part of their employment? Anybody? How long does it take you? Day and a half, yeah. So Jack mentioned Ford. One of the elements of their health and safety program is they are doing proactive analysis. So they're often doing a NIOSH type analysis somewhere in a plant in North America almost every day. There's tools coming on board now, like I said, computer vision, that allow you to automate this. So rather than take a day and a half, you film a couple repetitions of a worker. And I mentioned that the computer vision is not perfect, but what we're finding in our data is when we film, not just point and shoot, but we plan, point, and verify, and we capture good data, that we get a value. It will give us a value of how heavy a box can be, for example, a recommended weight limit. And what we find is that it's within 0.03 kilograms of what I would get if I used kind of direct entry data, plus or minus about half a kilogram. So the computer vision, again, plan, point, verify, not point and shoot, gives me values within about a kilogram, which is probably pretty reasonable. This was on the right side, you see data here from a study that was done with humans, so a bunch of folks were trained on this particular assessment tool. NIOSH, by the way, is the most frequent and popularly used MSD assessment tool in North America and has been for about 30 years for those in the MSD prevention space. And when you look at trained raters, the limits of agreement are about the same. It's about plus or minus a kilogram. So again, reinforcing that some of these tools might help to aid, but these numbers on the left change wildly if I don't film and sort of plan and be proactive about that. So again, being very cautious. So with that, I just want to wrap up with kind of 4 points here to conclude the talk today. Like I said, CRE-MSD, as Jack mentioned, has a number of different resources available, but we're also that hub for knowledge generation. So if there's challenges that you're seeing, and this particular challenge was born out of a number of companies looking at introducing AI, so they had questions about, can we just use it anywhere? What is the accuracy, et cetera, et cetera. So CRE-MSD is there to support that research. This is one example. In terms of AI specifically, and some of what we're learning on the specific use of computer vision, it does help to democratize assessment. It makes it easier for more people to do assessments, but based on the bottom left point here, training is really important. So plan, point, verify is a really important message. What I'm most excited about, and this kind of resonates with Jack, right now in health and safety, we're evaluating risk. We're evaluating some portion of that risk pie. With respect to MSDs, I would argue that the number of slices in the pie that we're actually able to capture is quite low. One of the reasons is because we often look at a static snapshot, or we watch one worker. As these tools emerge, it's going to allow us to capture more of the risk pie, which is going to help us be even better at reducing that 35-40% MSD rate. So I'm quite optimistic moving forward about the opportunities of these technologies. And then the bottom left, I think there was a lot of talk in the keynote this morning. We're going to see a lot of change the next 4, 5, 10 years. I suspect health and safety practices will be very different as we learn how to balance AI, but continue to keep humans in the loop, continue to play the key roles we need to play in that process, but augment it. So for example, it doesn't take a day and a half to do a particular assessment. I can do that assessment in maybe half a day, and I have that day back to do more consultation, to reach out, to engage, to grow culture, and all of the things we know that are really important upstream. Our thank you slide. Oh, there it is. Perfect. So with that, on behalf of Dr. Callaghan and I, thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
I'll just add in at the end why we thought that AI was important, because you heard the talk this morning, I think it came up twice, that, well, we'll just point AI at it and we'll remove all these hazards, right? We'll make jobs safer. This is what pointing AI at it involves. It is not trivial. And, I agree with Steve. I think one of the most powerful things that will come out of this is the ability to track more jobs in continuous format. So we will see what people are actually doing and be able to assess the risk. But right now, the other barrier, to be fully transparent, is we still have all the same threshold values that we have from NIOSH, et cetera. Coming with these new tools are not new thresholds yet.